ready?
Stand by. Here we go.
And action.
This is Martin Sixsmith, used to be the BBC's man in Moscow.
And Washington.
Your wife tells me you think you're mildly depressed.
Well, I got the sack. I'm unemployed.
Yes, but it wasn't your fault, was it?
That's why I'm depressed.
I immediately was captured by the story.
It's about this old Irish woman who is searching for her long-lost son with the journalist Martin Sixsmith.
She had a baby when she was a teenager. She's kept it secret for 50 years.
It's a story about an extremely exceptional woman.
He was taken from me, and I've been looking for him ever since.
Finding she was pregnant, her family sent her to the nuns to have the baby. While she was there, she saw the child being picked up and taken away.
Philomena, they're taking Anthony. They're taking him away.
Action!
Oh, I'll never forget that. The last I saw of him was going down the drive, and he's trying to look back to see me. Well, hello, Stephen.
You know, you meet Philomena and her own character is so splendid.
I was able to meet her and talk to her. It's a remarkable journey that she and Martin Sixsmith made.
Philomena is such a special lady and such a special character that made it so important for me just to get it right and do it as true to her as I could.
That is a huge responsibility. We don't want to sell her short in any way.
How exciting is it for you to be here at the premiere of a film made about your life?
Absolutely fantastic. I can't explain how exciting it is. I'm making the most of it. I'll never have another one. Really fantastic, really very good.
And
quite enjoying it.
And to have Judi Dench and Steve Coogan.
What more could I ask for? A lady like Judi Dench taking my part.
And you must be proud of your mother, huh?
Very proud. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the fact that it was a secret for so long and suddenly the entire world knows, that it's kind of, we don't quite know how that's all happened, but she's handling it remarkably well. Extremely proud of her.
I mean, look at her smile. She's obviously doing the best.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm
absolutely.
More than it wouldn't. If it had been for my daughter, there wouldn't have been a book. There wouldn't have been a film, because I have no idea how to use the internet. And when I broke the story to her, she started 10 years ago, and she's been working on it ever since. And that's my lovely daughter.
Be an actress. I wanted to be a designer, and I went to York Art School, and that's what I thought I would probably do. And then very early in the 50s, I was taken to Stratford, where I saw a production of King Lear with Michael Redgrave, and the set was completely open. It was a great, like a great dish on the stage, and in the middle was a rock which turned and was a throne or a cave or whatever. And I hadn't had no experience of that. I'd only ever seen a cross-arch theatre. The curtain goes up, you see the set, the curtain comes down for the interval, the set slightly changes or completely changes, the curtain goes up again. That's what my reference was. And now, in retrospect, of course, I think it was probably overnight, I thought. I'm not going to be able to be the kind of designer I'd like to be. I don't have that imagination. But it may have taken a bit longer than that. But anyway, one of my brothers, older than me, Geoffrey, only ever wanted to be an actor, only ever talked about the theatre, and so I caught it from him. In about my third term, I think, we had to do a mime, and we'd been warned about it. And I had completely forgotten. They said, you'll be called upon to do this mime at some point, and I'd completely forgotten about it. And one morning we all went in, and they said, okay, Judy, could we see your mime, please? And it came as a complete surprise to me. And I did something so minimalist that I was given unbelievably high marks for it. Minimalist, because I thought it out as I went along. And it was walking into a garden. I can remember it so clearly, walking into a... Well, I walked in and I did nothing, did I? I just stood there thinking, what the hell do I do next? So I smelt a bit of the air and I touched a bit of stuff. It was the only time I'd ever been minimalist for years and years and years, which of course people tell you to be, less is more, but you don't quite believe it. But after that, That was Walter Hudd, who was an actor and who was head of drama there. And after that, I suddenly thought, oh, maybe there's something in this acting art. Maybe I'll enjoy. And then I was cast as Ophelia at the Vic when I came out of drama school. And as my passion was Shakespeare, is, there I was.
Y tus tráilers, visita mi canal.
It's the most difficult thing of all to do, no question about it. You read the play all together on a Tuesday, you set it by Wednesday, you've learnt it on Thursday, you go into the studio at the weekend, and you have to play comedy then to a live audience who laugh or don't laugh. And that's it. And they edited it. It's terribly difficult. And we used to be introduced each Sunday evening. We used to have to and they'd say to everybody, and now here's Mr. Geoffrey Palmer, wah! And he'd walk in, and I would stand there waiting to go. And I said, how every single time I did it, I don't know how many episodes we made of it. I said, how on earth have I got myself into this position? Because it's very, very frightening. Because it's not kind of one thing or another. You know, you're playing to a live audience, and you haven't had any previews at all. You've got to rely totally on your comic timing. I was told very early on that I would never make a film. I was seen by a director for a very famous film, and he said, well, jolly nice to meet you. He said, I don't think you'll ever make films. Your face doesn't really add up. But as my passion, and is still, theatre, although I was rather hurt by it, it wasn't a great blow. If somebody had said to me, you won't play another part in the theatre, that would have been a blow. But for filming, I just thought, well, and I'd only done very, very few films. And then came Mrs. Brown, which was made for television, John Madden, and Harvey Weinstein saw it and said, this is not actually a television film, this is a movie. And so I'd been to America in 1958 with the OVIG for 6 months and had this kind of wonderful kind of love affair with the country. I loved it, and I thought I can't ever go back because it was so wonderful. And then suddenly, 38 years later, I found myself going back for the premiere of Mrs. Brown. And then I worked with Harvey a huge amount. And suddenly I had a film career. I was approached to play M, the new M in the Bond films. My husband was very, very keen about it. He said, I want to say I live with a Bond woman. Which he did. I have no idea why they thought that it would be good to have a female M. All I have to say is I'm really glad they did. And I did 4 films with Pierce and 3 with Daniel. And I've had a ball. I'm very cool between 10 and about 18. I really go down well in that area. And I always think, well, if they come and see me in a Bond film, they might come and see me in the theatre too. And it seems that my career is to do with really catching people to come to the theatre. But when I went to America with Mrs. Brown, after that huge break, 38 years, I was asked, apart from M and Mrs. Brown, what else have you done? So that my whole classic career flew out of the window in one go. Hal Prince cast me as Sally Bowles in Cabaret, and I learnt this fantastic thing which I've never forgotten. Hal Prince and Peter Hall, amongst a lot of other people, but they've taught me something that I remember almost every day. Hal Prince said to me, because I sing in exactly the same way as I speak, Hal said, do remember that if you speak in one way, you mustn't stop to sing in another voice. Whatever voice you speak in is the voice you sing in. That was one thing. And Peter Hall said to me when I was playing Cleopatra, never think you've got to play all the person in one scene. Just play an aspect of somebody in each scene, and by the end, with any luck, it might have added up. And don't believe everything that everybody says about you. Because, you know, you get that great speech of Ina Barber saying, oh, the barge she sat in and the perfume coming over the thing, and oh, she's absolutely... You know, what he's doing is boasting to all his friends. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what that person is like. And those are kind of 3 notes that I never forget, that I will never forget, and I pass on to everybody. I enjoy playing anything that comes my way, especially one that's as different from the last film as possible. I mean, I had a wonderful time playing Lady Macbeth, and I had a wonderful time playing Barbara Covert. Not a woman you'd want to ask to tea, I think, Notice and Scandal. We had a it's hard, very hard part. I loved every minute of it. You know, just I think ideally want to do something as different from the last thing you played. I just never fail to count myself very lucky. But there aren't enough roles for women, and you should never, ever for a minute stop being aware of the fact that, you know, that there's somebody right here, standing here, and behind them there's a whole mass of people standing, waiting to play the part you're playing. So you're lucky if you've got it. And I'd say behave well, do it well, and hang on to it if you can.
This is such a beautiful film, and if you could start talking about it from the top of the film, because you started out to do this as a producer, right?
Yeah, I read an article in the Guardian newspaper about 4 years ago, and I was looking for a project outside of what I normally do, which is in the UK, which is mainly comedy programs that I produce and I write for TV. And I've done a few movies mainly with Michael Winterbottom and the director, and I've also played the odd part in studio movies if they pay me enough money. But I didn't find them very satisfying, and so I was looking for a project that was just different and about something, you know. And I found this story in a newspaper that moved me, and so and I thought maybe I could turn it into a film. And the story itself was the newspaper article was I found it very moving. But I liked its ordinariness too. It was just about a woman who, if this hadn't happened to her, in some ways, Philomena is remarkable, but paradoxically, she's also quite an unremarkable woman. There are many people like Philomena, and I thought they would resonate with people because she could be anyone's mother or anyone's grandmother. And really beyond that, the story itself, of course, was quite sad, and you know, it moved me. But next to the article was a photograph of Martin with Philomena, and the two of them were laughing. Not unlike the poster, actually, a bit more. He was smiling more than I am. But I seemed at odds with the article, and I thought if I can put the humour into this tragic story, or somehow, mitigate it with some laughs, then I'd make a sort of a difficult story more palatable. And that's where that's how I got interested. And I saw that the book was available, and I optioned the book. Basically, I sort of went in there and took it out.
But the book is quite different, isn't it? Because you brought so much more into this film. I mean, you actually brought your character into the film.
There's a lot of artistic license in the film, and in fact, when I optioned the book before I read it, I was actually quite glad I did, because I might not have optioned it had I read it. But anyway, because really, Martin's story was mainly about the missing son, and I was more interested in this photograph of these two people who looked so very different. And I knew Martin Sixsmith was this journalist on the BBC, and he had a profile, as you see from the beginning of the film. He was fired by the government. So I knew who he was. So I just saw this Oxbridge intellectual, this liberal intellectual, and this sat next to this working class retired Irish nurse, and I thought they struck me as an odd couple, and so I thought that was the way. I knew there'd be a way to mine humour from their different perspectives on life, and I'm half Irish, and I was raised Catholic, so I felt like I knew a bit about that stuff, and in fact, one of the biggest liberties I took with it was turning Martin into a lapsed Roman Catholic, which he's not, in actual fact. He's Church of England, sort of Protestant, which in England basically means atheist. You go to church, but you don't believe any of that stuff, you know. Anyway, so I decided I'd do that to create more tension, and so that was a huge leap. But all that was done with Martin's blessing, you know. Because our script, I wanted to take him and put him into the story, which he's only in the book very marginally, and so that was interesting. I had to.
And it wasn't Gabby Tana, who's your producer, that you started with, that brought you to Jeff Pope.
Yeah, what happened was I thought I wanted to tell the story. I didn't know how. I wasn't going to write it originally, and then I had an idea about how I would write it, or how I'd tell a writer to write it. And she said, my producer Gabby Tana said, you should do it yourself. And I said, well, I need a writing partner who's not all about cheap gags, and they found me one, and it was Jeff Pope, and it was great because he was kind of he motored it along, and I'd become self-indulgent and wander around the room trying to grasp the air and think of more different ways to do the scene, and he'd say, come on, we're nearly on page 50, and measure it in a page count kind of way. But throughout the whole thing, to me, it was just, I wanted to do something that was, that was about something, but enjoyable. I don't think you have to, talking about difficult subjects has to be a chore, you know, and I don't really like films that wear their self-importance on their sleeve. You know, I think you can have films of substance and they still be enjoyable. You know.
Well, when you were first working with him, when the two of you were writing, were you acting out the part before you gave yourself the part?
I think, funnily enough, I actually did have a meeting when I met Judi Dench, and I told her the story, and she was really enamoured, and she said, oh, it sounds amazing. And she said, and who do you think would play Martin? And I said, well, we had a few ideas. And the latest one is me. How about it? And she said, oh, okay. And then we moved on the conversation. Where it got too awkward.
But that's great, because you were in stages of doing the producing, the writing, and then ended up doing it for yourself, which is fabulous.
I was thinking of directing it until she came on board, and then I got scared. So I don't want to tell her what to do. And then as I was writing it, because I was getting a lot of stuff off my chest about Catholicism within the script, I realized I thought I knew how to play this. And also, part of it was quite cathartic, because some of my family are religious people, and I didn't want to dishonor them in the way we wrote the screenplay. So it was important, and most of the script is actually built up from interviews I conducted with Martin and Philomena, and that she led me the way to the conclusion of the story, which is when I asked her if she forgave them for what they did to her, and she thought about it and said, yes, I do. And her daughter Jane said, I don't. And so I saw a way to sort of move towards that in the story. You know.
When you were writing it, were you dealing with the nuns at that time, or dealing with the family in the United States, or were you writing it and then going to that?
No, I didn't have any contact with the States. I interviewed Martin in two ways. I interviewed him as a journalist and asked him questions about the facts that he'd discovered and where we were, if we could take a liberty, or we weren't sure about something, and whether it would be too much of a stretch to say this or that. And he was very helpful. And then I also asked him questions as an individual, as a character, and said, I asked him personal questions because I wanted to find out what made him tick. So he gave us all the information really about America. In terms of Ross Cray, the Abbey, Sean Ross Abbey there, I went to visit the Abbey where he had. I went to find the grave myself and look around with Jeff. We went on a little road trip ourselves, and I looked around, and really when I was retracing Martin's footsteps there, it was quite interesting, because I went looking for the graves of the children, exactly as I do in the film, actually. So in some ways I was kind of, it was like training for playing Martin, because I was retracing the steps, and I in fact had a rather uncomfortable encounter with one of the nuns who's still there.
Did she know what you were?
Yes, I said, well, I'd phoned the Abbey a few days before and said, look, I'd like to come and talk to you about making this film, and the head nun there said she wanted nothing to do with the making of the film, so we just thought we'd go and have a look around anyway, and then I had this very awkward, difficult conversation with her where she said, you know, she said I showed great impertinence by not knocking on the door and asking for permission to look around. And I said, well, we called you a couple of days ago and you said you didn't want to help, so why would I knock on the door and ask you to help me? Didn't say you wanted. And she said, you know, what do you want to know? And I said, where are the graves of the mothers and babies? And she said, oh, they're over there somewhere. And I couldn't find them. And it was only when I went back to England that I looked through the file of cuttings that had been assembled by Anthony's or Michael, depending on how you see him, his ex-boyfriend who'd sent over this file. And amongst the cuttings was a letter to all the photographs and the Super 8 material, some of which is authentic. And
where did that come from? The authentic, did that come from the boyfriend?
That came from the boyfriend. He gave us a load of stuff. And,
how great.
Yeah, and we intercut that with some stuff that we recreated. And that worked quite well. But we talked to Philomena and Martin, and Philomena, you know, she sort of guided the story, really.
Let's go talk a little bit about the great Judi Dench. Was she always, when you were writing, was that your ideal person?
She was, I always wanted her to play Philomena. So we didn't go to anyone else, because I told the story to her agent, who said, go to the, oh, how thoughtful of you. God bless you.
You have to make the cross.
I'm not going to do the sign of the cross now. I'm too hypocritical. What was the, I don't remember, where were we?
We're talking about Judi.
Oh yes, no, she was top of the list, and her agent said, go to her house and tell her the story. So I went and knocked on the door of her Sussex cottage, and she invited me in, made me a cup of tea and a sandwich, and I said, okay, I told her the story, and she said, oh, that sounds really good. I said, are you interested? And she said, I'm very interested. And she had Irish ancestry, and she wanted to play something different, and I hoped it would appeal to her. And then we hadn't finished writing the screenplay, but as we went back to write it, I said to Jeff, we'd be writing a scene, I'd say, look, you know, we've got Judi Dench, let's not waste her. You know, we've got some Judi Dench, and we need to, you know, remember that she's got this charisma that she brings with her.
She does, yeah.
And her face is so interesting, and so some of the scenes, there's a scene where she retraces her footsteps looking for the last time she'd seen her child. And she went there. I said, you know, when we were writing it, we don't need any dialogue. Just her face will be enough, because people will read into it what the scene's telling us, and the ditto at the end. And what was important about the scenes was that no one else in the movie, no one else in the story on screen, is privy to those thoughts. It's just her thoughts, and the only people who see it, the only people who are aware of those thoughts are herself and the audience watching, because all the other participants in the film don't see that. They're either behind her or away from her. So it's a private moment that's only shared with the audience, and that's really that's something I wanted to have from the get-go. And knowing that we had her, I knew it would work. You know.
Well, the two of you have such beautiful chemistry together. Had you ever worked together?
No.
Because it seems like you've been together for a long time.
Well, you quickly cut through the, you know, you start, once I've made her laugh, and she's very relaxed, she's not kind of pompous or pretentious, she's very, you know, easygoing, and she likes to laugh. So in between takes, I just, in the car, where it was a lot of car scenes, I'd make her laugh and joke with her, and she'd tease me, and I'd tease her, and she kept saying, asking me if she kept accusing me of secretly having Botox and collagen implants. I think one of the interesting things about doing the film was learning about you know, that no one has a monopoly on wisdom, and that there's and that's the most important thing about it, I think, really, is that no one has all the answers, and you know, although it's interesting, at the very end of the film, Stephen Frears, who was the other ingredient, of course, which is quite an important one. I mean, actually, when I was talking to Judy, I said, Stephen Frears is interesting, maybe he'll do it. And she said she'd worked with him before, and she said, oh, do you think he would? And I thought, oh, that's good, she'll be reassured. I was scared if there was a director. She said, oh, I'll work with any director, you know, Stephen, if you think they're good enough. And I said, well, I was very worried about the idea of her not getting on with some director and it jeopardising the whole thing, so...
And did he come on right away? I mean, he's an amazing
he's
director.
Great. No, he's he's very grumpy. But
That's good.
Yeah, it is. No, at first I was, because he said, I'm interested in the film, and he rang up and I said, I hear you're interested, and he just started picking holes in it straight away. And I thought, does he really want to do this? And someone said, well, the fact that he's talking about it means he wants to. So we had a lot of discussion about it. And also, because it's not his world, he said he's Jewish. And he said to me, you know, he said, look, this is not my world, this is your world. So tell me about it, you know. And he would say, I don't know what the scene means. And that was quite good, because he wasn't, he was the outside perspective on it. He wasn't too emotionally involved. And there is a lot of my stuff in there. And he was able to say, I don't understand this, explain this, and I couldn't take anything for granted. And with, you know, so he was great. He was really generous, and he's very collaborative by nature, not through any kind of philanthropic reasons, or just because that's the way he likes to work. He involves writers heavily, and I went to the edit, and you know, he let me see things.
So you were really involved from beginning to end. I mean, this was your idea to do this film, and you put it all together and ended up getting it done. It's a beautiful, beautiful film.
Well, this one, it was good. We had, it's what I wanted on screen, and more so is there. And even, you know, Alexander Desplat's score I love, because it's not prescriptive, it's not over-prescriptive. It doesn't really lay it on with a trowel and say, okay, everyone, you've got to cry now, please cry, you know, or, you know, this is really funny, or this is really cute, and he pulls back from that. He's really restrained, and all that stuff helped. It's like, you know, when they say to make a good movie, 100 things have to go right, and if 2 things or 1 thing goes wrong, then it all starts to fall apart. And
was it divided up into 2 parts as far as shooting, that you shot in America and then you shot in Ireland? In what order did you do that?
We flew to Washington and did all that stuff first.
Oh, first?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I had to escort Judy all the way to Washington. And she got held up. She got held up at security at Heathrow, and they were searching her bag, and she got really, really annoyed. And she said to me, sometimes I forget I'm not M. And then when we got to...
That's great!
When we got to US immigration, I mean, that was far more... She was far more... the Americans gave her far more respect. I mean, I've never been through passport control as quick in all my life. You know? It really was like they were whisking her through the head of MI5. You know? But we shot all the Washington stuff, and then we went to Ireland and did all that stuff, and then we finished off in England. Now, the Abbey is actually... there's actually a clever bit... No one knows there's quite a lot of CGI in the movie, because there's two buildings that were made into one. The old Abbey, where you see her running looking for the baby and she looks through the gates, is like 20 miles away from the place where we knock on the door, but they sort of joined them up. It's quite clever, because no one knows. That's the best use of CGI, when no one knows you've used it. Oh, you could say that about any film, couldn't you? You say it's all CGI.
No, but it really is a beautiful film, and in the journey that the 2 of you take, the road trip, in a sense, of trying to find the sun, is really beautiful.
Well,
and fun.
The best kind of movies, I think, are where comedy and tragedy sit side by side, as they do in life. And Billy Wilder, you know, knew that and was able to do that to perfection. And I think a lot of old-fashioned Hollywood movies actually have it. It's not like, you know, it's a new discovery. In some ways, the film is actually quite old-fashioned, I think, you know, in a good way. Well, like all the things in the film, there's a kernel of truth in everything, and then we build on it. I think Philomena is closer to the real Philomena than Martin is to Martin. Martin's a hybrid of Martin and me, to be honest. Philomena's probably closer to her, but you know, we crank up the kind of slightly eccentric Irish thing and the idiosyncrasies she has. Philomena is a very entertaining person. If you meet her, she talks a lot, and she's got lots of stories to tell. If you ask her about what happened to her at Ross Cray, then I hope you don't have another appointment to go to, because you'll be there for a long time. So there's that was based on me talking to her and thinking this is good, and then spinning it a bit. Martin. Whenever I went to interview Philomena at first, Martin was always there, and always slightly, there's a slight awkwardness about Martin, about Philomena being happy, and it was.
He was very protective.
He was protective, and yes, and not entirely comfortable in his own skin, and that was good. Like when I saw stuff like that, I thought, oh, this is really useful. I can sort of spin this, and I'd ask them questions. I'd ask Philomena questions about what kind of books she read and what kind of things she didn't. She actually more likes quite bloodthirsty thrillers, to be honest with you. But I thought that romantic fiction would be funnier. So a lot of those things. They have different worldviews, but he was always very respectful of her. He's actually not he was not as spiky as I played him in the film at the start. He didn't attack her religion the way I do as Martin in the film, but that's just my stuff. So all these things have a modicum of truth, and I think that the way the film was written, anything that happened. Any real misdemeanors that occur in the film actually happened. We didn't invent people doing bad things. They all happened if they happened on the screen. And what we invented really was just a way of talking about religion. And we took things that, for example, I'll give you an example of how we spun something. I said to Martin, when I was asking him how he actually found out about Philomena, he said, well, I saw the name Michael Hess, and I remembered the name, it rang a bell. I said, why? He said, well, when I worked in Washington as the Washington correspondent for the BBC, I'd seen his name on White House memos and stuff. And I said, could you have met him? And he said, yeah, I could have met him. I said, could you have, how? He said, well, I might have shaken his hand somehow. I went, okay, right. So I spun that into the scene when she says I shook his hand, but he couldn't remember anything about him, because he didn't actually say that to Philomena, but he had actually shaken his hand, and I used that, and all those things. You take the truth and then you fashion it into something that's has a narrative, helps the narrative. Well, there's a nun called Sister Annunziata who took the photograph of Anthony. Now that's a true part of the story. There's no spin on it at all. There was a nun called Annunziata, and she did take a photograph secretly because they weren't allowed to, and gave it to Philomena as a gift, and told her not to tell anyone. So she was clearly a kind woman, and Philomena only ever talks affectionately about her. I think some people in Ireland saw it as, many people, is that to let sleeping dogs lie, as they say, and just leave it be and sweep it under the carpet. And because the book, and then more so the film, in fact, has legitimized it and made it okay to talk about it. Philomena is not unusual. It's peculiar, but there's still a lot of people who are embarrassed about. In our enlightened times, we think it's peculiar. So you had a child out of wedlock. It's not that big a deal. Life goes on. It was really, really a big deal, and not in a good way all those years ago. And there are many old Irish ladies who have come, and the English ones too, who've come out and said, have tried to trace their children, and the film's given them a sort of platform and made them feel able to do that, because they've seen what's happened with Philomena. Philomena was despite the tragedy of it, Philomena has been unburdened by both the book and the film. She feels like this. She has a lightness about her, which is reflected in Judy's performance.
It's a beautiful performance, by the way. Well, yours too. It's just exceptional to see the two of you work together. I thought you must have worked together 4 or 5 times and knew each other so well, because you're so comfortable and at ease with each other.
Well, when you set all the scenes in a car, there's sort of nowhere for her to go, so she's got to get to know me. You got to get in and out, and after in between takes, you go, we'll just stay in the car and talk. So it's worked out quite well.
I think that would be fun, though.
The problem with a film like this, the potential problem with a film like this, is that it could be very claustrophobic and myopic, because it's a lot of stuff in a car, and So from a point of view of wanting the audience to breathe, I think what Stephen did, and Robbie Ryan, the DP, is fantastic, is every opportunity to open it up and see the sky and is really important. Otherwise, the audience would let asphyxiate, because it's such a sort of, the story weighs down you so much that you really need kind of. I mean, I think when I see the skies in Maryland halfway through the film, I think it's a real. I think you sort of physically breathe out, and it's like a breath of fresh air. So I think it tied in with that. It was just get them out of the car, get them out of dark spaces.
Well, it's really a beautiful film, and your work is remarkable. Everybody's work in this film is great, and we congratulate you and thank you for coming here.
Thanks for coming.